down to business.
When he drinks, he thinks.
That's the nectar of the gods, baby.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the #1 liquid-fueled, liquid lubricated show on the interwebs. This is the Whiskey Musings Broadcast. Oh, my goodness. Golly, wow, there's just so much that has been going on here all over the place. It's just so much stuff going on. But hey, you know, when I was growing up, my dad used to tell me, he said, it's not what you know, it's who you know. And I got to be honest with you, that is something that is very true. It is, I mean, he told me that way back when I was young. And yeah, I grew up. I know. I grew up and I learned that, you know, there are certain people that seem to be born under lucky stars. There are certain people who seem to have a propensity for being able to get out of things. There are a group of people who, no matter what happens, always seem to land on their feet, and they can never. I mean, another phrase is also like failing upward. Like, you know, you get that person, Kamala Harris, who basically is just complete shite. And all they do is they just keep getting better and better and better. They get bigger and bigger and bigger, and so on and so forth. And I unfortunately was not born with that possibility. I also wasn't born in you know, in the in crowd, let's say. Not saying that I would actually want to be a part of the in crowd, because after seeing what some of the in crowd is doing today, and being you know, being going on and everything today, yeah, it's just one of those things. Hey, so I got a few articles here coming up that'll just kind of give you an indication as to what's going on. And also, something popped in the last couple of days, and it's kind of funny, but I'm seeing a little bit of information, a little bit of those cracks showing up again, and another foundation that we're making a dent. Okay, we're making a dent, and also at the very end of the show, or toward the end of the show, whenever I feel like it. Let's just be honest. This is my show. That's kind of how it rolls. But toward the end of the show, I've got a big announcement. Not for me. It's not a big announcement for me, but it is a big announcement for the people that it's for. And yeah. So anyway, I noticed a few people over in the Rumble chat that have noticed a couple things. First of all, my background tonight. You guys have seen it before. It's not brand new, but you guys have seen it before. And the other thing, too, is that you'll notice that, yes, I am wearing a nice shirt, and they're complimenting it on the shirt. I'm trying to, like, up my game here, people. I need to do something a little different in order to attract more folks to this channel, to this show, and, you know, really get things going here. And speaking about getting things going, let me go ahead and start us off with, where is it? There it is. TGRN Blues. 11 blues lovers have come together to create a dedicated 24/7 blues channel. From the True Grit Roots Network, join the Real Lady A, Gina Coleman from Misty Blues, Big Daddy Ray Hansen, Jeff Hayes, Holly Harris, Angela Easley, Vinnie Marini, Amber Hill, also known as Burr. Sorry, had something in my mouth there. Ray Blueshound Brown, Memphis Mark, and of course, Jonathan Oogie Richards, as they share the blues every week with the original first run shows from the TGRN Blues channel. Show calendars and more information are available at tgrn.net. Breaking boundaries for Authentic Roots Radio, True Grit Roots Network, tgrn.net, Austin, Texas. And of course, full disclosure, I am part owner in that organization. Okay. Also, tonight is, and I almost forgot about this, but tonight is Whiskey Wednesday. It's like Taco Tuesday, but for badasses. And for tonight's whiskey that I am drinking, I dug a little bit and I found that I haven't finished this off yet, so I've got to put a dent in it again. This is the Redneck Riviera whiskey by John Rich. As you can see, I've still got a couple of glasses left, but it's coming. It's coming. So there we go. It's on its way. I'll admit I was kind of surprised about this whiskey. It does have some interesting flavor to it, and it seems a little lighter than some of the others. I generally drink a darker whiskey. I don't know if you guys can see. It's kind of hard to see because it's messing around, but anyway. Okay. So there we go. That's what we got tonight, for tonight. And of course, because of True Grit Roots Network being our Wednesday sponsor, I am drinking out of my True Grit Roots Network, rocks glass with rocks or whiskey stones in the whiskey. I love this logo, it being in USA colors. I do. We have a red and a red on black and a white on black also, but this one is really my favorite. Gee, I wonder why. I won't say, but it is what it is. And of course, a good shout out to a lot of my massive Whiskey Warrior P1s out here in Facebook land, over on Rumble as well. And to all of you who are on Twitter and possibly even watching over on YouTube, surprisingly, I've gotten a couple of people, not subscribers, but I've started to notice that some people are popping up on YouTube and or at least watching for a little bit. So that's cool. I mean, this show isn't for everybody. But it definitely is. I personally think it's a great show. I think it's a good show, but then again, I'm kind of biased. Anyway, so hello to everyone out there and watching us live. And then of course, if you don't catch me live, you can also watch all of the recordings as well. I mean, they're on Rumble and YouTube. And I think Facebook caches them for a little while too. Don't know for sure how long, but I know that they're there. Okay. So, let me get things kind of kicked off here with the first, the first article that I have up. And this first article is talking about, the progression for the Biden impeachment inquiry has popped. So apparently the House Oversight Committee has announced 3 witnesses for the first Biden impeachment hearing. Now that's obviously that tag or that title line or I'm drawing a blank as to what they're actually called, but that title line basically is a little off because it isn't an impeachment hearing. It's an impeachment inquiry. And the 3 witnesses, and this is coming out of the Western Journal. The 3 witnesses that are being potentially called here are as follows. Let me find them here. Okay. It's Bruce Dubinsky, or Dubinsky, however you want to pronounce it, the founder of Dubinsky Consulting, Eileen O'Connor, a former assistant attorney general with the Department of Justice Tax Division, and Jonathan Turley, a professor at George Washington University Law School. Now, for those of you that are not aware of that name, you may have heard it. You may have heard that name a little bit. I've talked a little bit about him. He is a lawyer, a senior fellow, and he puts out opinion pieces at times. And so, yeah, it just he talks about the law and things like that. He's talked about stuff like the whole 14th Amendment and trying to get rid of Trump that way. And of course, you know, some of the things that the Trump lawsuits in DC with Smith and all of his ilk. And then, of course, the Georgia case and the New York case, which, by the way, I don't know if anybody saw this. This isn't necessarily part of the piece, but I don't know if anybody caught this. I'm sure everybody did. But apparently a judge has ruled that Donald Trump and his organization evaluated his land properties, his real estate holdings, and everything else higher than what is actually the case. Now, I don't know where this judge gets this idea that that they're going to be that they're going to be a fair evaluator of real estate, because supposedly or reportedly, I'll come back to the case here, come back to this piece in just a minute, but reportedly, what they did is they went ahead and valuated his house at like $20 million. And real estate agents have jumped on it and been like, you know what? No, that's not the case. He could probably sell that for $300 million. So anyway, again, this whole thing is trying to get him to, because apparently when you put up collateral on the banks in order to gain loans for businesses, I mean, obviously you got to put up collateral sometimes. And so he did valuations on his businesses and every business, his private holdings and things like that in order to try to, show that he was willing and able to pay back the loans that he was taking out for his businesses. And, we'll see what happens. I mean, obviously any court case, regardless of the outcome, whether the outcome, it doesn't end right away. It has to be, run through all the appellate process and that kind of stuff. So don't be surprised. I mean, just because that's been happening with, or there is a judgment that's been put in place or some sort of a decision or opinion, it doesn't mean that's the end of it. And believe me, I don't think that Trump is going to let that stand, to be honest with you, from that standpoint. But anyway, okay. So I got that out of the way. Let me go ahead and get this back to here. So this hearing is supposed to be tomorrow, is the start. And so these people are coming in to start their testimony, essentially start discussing. They're scheduled to appear tomorrow in front of the impeachment inquiry panel into Joe Biden. So that's going to be interesting. Obviously, that's going to take some shape for that. And so, yeah, we'll just have to see what happens. Now, they announced it on X, formerly known as Twitter, which is where everybody kind of got this from. So, for those of you who are not on the X platform, I've got to tell you, I mean, other than the fact that it is a cesspool of a bunch of dumb liberals for the most part. There are some good people that are out there, that show up. There are some, people like myself and a few others that are essentially trying to make X a nice place. But unfortunately, I mean, just like anything else in today's day and age, it seems like liberalism and leftism and idiocy has taken over a lot of our platforms, a lot of our institutions and things of that nature. So, unfortunately, you got to live with it. But at least for now, until something goes on. So yeah, the new name is X, formerly known as Twitter. That's kind of like, the whole Prince thing when Prince became the symbol and formerly known as Prince. I just dated myself. Anyway. All right. Okay. So another article popped. And ironically, this article or this piece of information came out right after that announcement about Trump having his evaluations in the whole case, the case order and opinion coming out. It was kind of interesting how this came out shortly thereafter, but this from the Daily Wire. For all of you morons who are still out there, and I'm not talking about my Whiskey Warrior P1s, but anyone who comes and watches this broadcast who isn't in the intelligent know, and by that I mean following things and knowing things and knowing the truth of what's going on out there, that are all those idiots that are out there claiming that there is no evidence that Hunter Biden and Joe Biden did any of this together, in particular Joe Biden. The Daily Wire popped this, or at least I'm going to give them credit for it because this is their article. $260,000 in Chinese wires to Hunter Biden listed Joe Biden's home address as the beneficiary address. Okay. Now this came, apparently these wires were sent right after or right in 2019. I've been hearing a couple different reports, but according to some of the reports that are out there, this was wired. So China wired this money to Hunter Biden at Joe Biden's house. And essentially in 2019, right after he announced that he was running for president. So seriously, folks, I'm sorry, yeah, it's just, you've got pay to play written all over this thing, and why anybody is, and speaking of which, why anybody is even arguing that some of this information is true. I don't know if anybody noticed, but Hunter Biden, I don't have the article on this, but I read this. Hunter Biden is actually suing like Rudy Giuliani and a couple others. He was suing we already knew, and I talked about this, that we were suing that he was suing the repair shop. But apparently he is also going after like Rudy Giuliani and others for defamation in character or of character and that kind of stuff related to the laptop. Now, I mean, okay, it's already been proven. It's his laptop. It's already been proven that most of the information, if not all of the information, has been thrown out there in terms of his, in terms of the information being accurate. Okay. We know that the Hunter Biden laptop exists. The information on it is accurate. It hasn't been manipulated, at least for the most part. And, this is just, again, part of the information that's coming out with the idea that, he's clean as the driven snow. He's a Biden and so on and so forth. And I mean, come on, seriously, he's suing other people over this thing, which is further proving that it's his. Because otherwise, why would he be suing? I mean, if they wanted to go down the path, honestly, if they wanted to go down the path of basically saying that this was not his laptop, they sure screwed that up, because they freaking him suing is just enough to confirm that the laptop is his, and him suing for things like defamation of character and so on and so forth. That just even more proves that the information on it is correct, for the most part. So, I mean, anyway, I seriously get tired of people who are sitting here claiming that this information isn't real, that the laptop isn't real, that the information on it isn't real, that there is no Hunter Biden scandal, so on and so forth. So I just get tired of it, but here we are again, right back at it, that they obtained records, and the banks produced records of 2 wires originating from Beijing, linked to BHR Partners, which was a joint venture between Hunter Biden's company and a Chinese investment company, where Hunter Biden served on the board of directors. And the 2 wires were sent to Hunter Biden in the summer of 2019, totaling $260,000. I've heard it was broken up to $250,000 and $10,000, but it listing him as the beneficiary, but listed the father's home, meaning Joe Biden's Delaware home, as Hunter's address. So it just, yeah. Just horrible. Just horrible. Horrible in the fact that people just can't seem to understand that we're living in a very sad state of affairs, huge area of corruption and everything else that we got going on here. This is just amazing. Also from the Daily Wire as well, apparently, a report has come out that the feds have actually interviewed 100, not 1, not 10, not 50, but 100 witnesses in the criminal probe of Biden's handling of classified material. Okay. The one question that I have, that I think a lot of people have had this question, is what is it that Joe Biden could have provided these people that would have caused him to gain the kind of money that they were spending on him? Because we all know Joe Biden is not the smartest person in the room. He also is thinking that his son is the smartest person in the room because, smartest person is up there. We also know that he had, up to 20 different shell corporations. And for anybody who has even watched a crime drama, the whole purpose of a shell corporation is to hide who the individual is that is in charge of said shell corporation or said transaction or whatever. So, the whole idea that he had 20 of these things, not 1, not 2, not 10, but 20 of these things is just beyond me. And then you have, of course, the need to use pseudonyms to other, to other email addresses and things like that. I'll admit, I've got a bunch of email addresses out there. But, to use them pseudonym wise and to have them tied to government, emails as well is just beyond me. It's just horrible. But anyway, federal officials have reportedly interviewed approximately 100 witnesses in their criminal investigation of President Joe Biden's handling of classified material while he was vice president in the Obama administration and while he was a senator for the state of Delaware. Now, here's the key part. Now, this you got to understand. Here's the key part. ABC News is the one that broke this story. You got to ask yourself, okay, why would ABC News, a left-leaning outlet and one that has tried to protect the Bidens, over and over and over again, why would they kick this out? And there's plenty of information out there. Dan Bongino, who was extremely salty today, if you have a chance to see, if you have a chance to listen to Dan Bongino's podcast for today or watch it on Rumble, he was extremely salty today. It is amazing. It's amazing. But anyway, so it's it's amazing the fact that NBC or ABC News is reporting this. But it kind of makes you wonder if there's a possibility that maybe Dan Bongino in this case is right, that Joe Biden might not be the nominee when we come around to the situation. Now, you'll also note too, and Dan brought this up, but you also note too that ABC did a poll here recently where Donald Trump was up in a head-to-head matchup. I mentioned this last program, I think, where Donald Trump was up in a head-to-head matchup against Joe Biden by like 10 points. So yeah, it's it's kind of interesting. We're seeing the slow shift. I'm calling it slow because I'm gonna like kind of take a half a step back for a second, but a slow shift in messaging and so on and so forth with regards to this. Now, one of the things also too is that I saw an article where the special counsel, and I think that's David Weiss, special counsel was supposed to be going up on the Hill and reportedly going to testify soon in this whole thing as well. All right. So I titled this podcast with regards to the with regards to this particular thing. I titled it to where it's not just it's not just that they know, but it's who, they know. Oh shoot, I can't even remember what I titled it. Hold on. Give me just a second. Oh yeah, they all know and know each other. Okay, so this is the key, is that they all know and they know each other. Well, believe me, this, this entire, the left and everything else, I've told you this before. The left is, the left himself, or the left itself as a conglomeration of individuals. They all know each other. They all know what each other is doing. They all protect each other. They all side with each other. It doesn't really matter how they feel about each other. They're still the idea is you have to protect the institution and not just the individuals. But this popped in Fox News. So, we keep talking about Newsom in California, but apparently Newsom's longtime ties to Hunter Biden emerge after he justifies his business deals. So Fox News Digital reviewed dozens of emails between Hunter Biden and Gavin Newsom and his associates. So here we go, folks. I'm sorry, but this is so true. They all know each other. They all know each other. And they all know everything that's going on. So Gavin Newsom had a recent defense of Hunter Biden against the allegations of nepotism and shady business deals. It follows emails from Biden's infamous laptop showing the president's son donated thousands of dollars to Newsom's gubernatorial campaign, and of course lent his name to multiple fundraisers in his behalf. Newsom, who is expected to attend Wednesday's GOP debate on behalf of the Biden campaign, brushed off allegations of Hunter Biden's corrupt business dealings last week, saying that it is hardly unique for people to use their family members to get ahead. Newsom told CNN's Dana Bash, "I don't know enough about the details of that. I mean, I've seen a little of that." When asked if Hunter Biden did anything inappropriate leveraging his father's name in some of his business dealings. If that's the new criteria, there's a lot of folks in a lot of industries, not just in politics, where people have family members and relationships they're trying to parlay and get a little influence and benefit in that respect. That's hardly unique. Now, he's not necessarily wrong about that. Okay? He's not necessarily wrong about that. But still, the point being is, if you think these folks don't know each other and don't know, it's all a inner circle of individuals. It's all an inner circle. By the way, speaking about that, I hear tell that Ron DeSantis and Gavin Newsom have agreed to a televised debate. They have agreed to a televised debate. And I don't have the details on it just yet because I didn't even look. But anyway, so there's that. But it's not just limited to people like Gavin Newsom, who is, Nancy Pelosi's nephew, I think. It's not just limited to that. You remember that guy? He's got big old eyes, saucers, for eyes. He keeps touting that he knows things, that he knows he's got information on Trump and everything else. But anyway, yeah, well, this came out recently as well. Representative Adam Schiff earmarked more than $10 million to his defense contractor donors. If you're getting a campaign contribution and getting your earmark for the same company or for a client of that lobbyist, it has the perception of pay to play, says taxpayers of common sense. So apparently, they did a FOIA request, and found that, so this is an Earmark Records. Actually, it wasn't that one. It was Politico. Politico did a review of Earmark Records, why Politico is going after Adam Schiff, I don't know, but this is kind of interesting. They seem to be imploding a little bit. But according to a review of Earmark Records by Politico, Schiff earmarked over $10 million of taxpayer money, to 5 companies to develop military technologies between 2001 and 2007. See, this is how this thing works. Okay. This is how this thing works. When you have donors, and especially, and this is part of my argument. I mean, this is part of my argument to having big business as a part of, big business as a part of politics. Okay. Now I do understand politics. There are laws that can be created that will affect big businesses and so on and so forth. I can understand that argument, but here's the thing, is that I actually think we need to limit how much is going to be able to be donated in any one given sense of the word. And the reason why I say this is because of situations like this. You have a large campaign donor, and it's some sort of a business that is, because, let's face it, individuals are not going to be able to put thousands of dollars up toward a campaign, but a business can. as well as some of the higher end elites with their big money and everything else. They can donate a lot to people. And so one of the things that doesn't seem to make sense is that how these donations, what do they turn into? Well, obviously they turn into favorability for the individual or the organization that donates the biggest money. I mean, everybody knows that that's kind of how things work. If I were to go and donate, $10,000, let's say, to a campaign, I would expect that campaign is going to want to know what is important to me. And so when you have especially consistent donors who donate maximums every single year, you also have the challenge where, there's going to be some of that pay to play. I mean, you owe them. That's one of the things, is that you owe them. Well, this kind of thing is not surprising, let's say, but it does go to show that integrity doesn't show up in politics anymore. There isn't integrity at all with any of this. And they are all doing it. I mean, don't get me wrong, Democrats, Republicans, it doesn't make a difference. They are all doing this. This is the scam. And, sometimes they're even given favors off the books. They're given extra money. Why else do you think that somebody can go into Congress starting off at $174,000 a year and then come out of Congress, 2, 4, 6, 10, whatever years later, and be valuated at millions and millions of dollars? You're going to be making money somewhere. Now, I understand as far as the presidency and that kind of stuff, you can go and do speeches. Like, for an example, I just saw an article where Michelle Obama did a 1-hour speech over in Germany and was handed $700,000. What the hell? How? What topic could she, use that word carefully, what topic could she be talking about that would be so damn interesting that you would pay her $700,000 for that hour? I mean, I could understand maybe a couple thousand, but $700,000 for a 1-hour speech? Holy crap. I am in the wrong racket, because I speak for an hour and a half on Wednesdays and Saturdays, and I'm not getting paid nearly that amount. And I know that I put out some entertaining content. This is just, I can't even imagine. Realistically, I can't even imagine what that would amount to. What would her topic be on? That's the thing. I just don't get it. But anyway, I digress. Back to the whole situation. I mean, that's kind of how politics is working nowadays, is that, you get those donors who donate the maximum, and they want you to do something for them, protect them, maybe put in some sort of legislation that's going to help them out. That's kind of the way it plays. And so, and Buddy Weiser points out, insider stock trading. You're right. But why? We need to figure out a way. Honestly, we need to figure out a way to get rid of some of that in terms of the corruption of what's going on, because it just doesn't make sense to me that you can have these people in here. And, yeah, so I just don't get it. I just don't get it at all. But I mean, again, we're kind of in the era of corruption, and just to be clear, I'm not saying that the corruption started anytime here recently. This has been going on for a long, long time. In fact, I was in a conversation with a couple business partners, and I pointed out that a lot of the direction change in America has started from way back to, I would say, at least FDR, if not before that, in terms of the direction change away from the Constitution and its principles, for sure. Speaking about the Constitution, elections, and elections in particular, because of course the Constitution kind of talks about elections. I saw this. Now, what's interesting about this particular article is the fact that it came out of CNN Business. And not too many places, I don't think too many places have picked it up. And actually, I was even turned on to it by one of my business partners. They were like, hey, can you check this out and make sure this is legit? So let me go and point this out. I don't know if anybody's seen this, but you remember those voting machines, and in particular Smartmatic voting machines, where they are actually in an active lawsuit against Fox News, I think, for defamation, something like $2.7 billion or whatever. Well, check this out. They apparently, and this is really quietly showing up, but they apparently have been implicated in an alleged bribery scheme involving a top Filipino election official. Now, you read that and you think to yourself, okay, they were implicated. But here's the deal with this. So Smartmatic was given a contract to hand over like 94,000 machines for the Filipino election in this particular case in 2016, and for the presidential election. And so there was a guy in charge. Let me see. What is this guy's name? I'm trying to remember his name here. There's a guy in charge of that, and I got to read down. Oh, shoot. Okay. So, sorry. Let me get this guy's name right. Juan Bautista. Okay. And Juan apparently was in a scheme where he was getting money, they allege up to $4 million from potentially 4 unnamed executives from Smartmatic for potentially changing the outcome of the Filipino presidential election in 2016. And Smartmatic, of course, is where these executives work. So this isn't necessarily when you look at it in terms of like 2020, there's a lot of people who have popped up and been like, hey, 2020, the election was stolen. It was stolen by the machines, et cetera, et cetera. However, Smartmatic is denying any of this, even though there has been evidence shown that the Smartmatic machines can change votes on the fly, and meddle within the confines. But this case was brought by a Florida district attorney, and the grand jury has convened on this thing. And so what's happening here again is not a case in point of Smartmatic itself. Okay, other than the fact that 4 unnamed executives are implicated in this potential bribery scheme, but it does throw a bit of shade on the entire thing that Smartmatic is trying to go after Fox News, Sydney, what is her name? Rudy Giuliani, Sidney Powell, and, Mike Lindell and others that are in this. So it's going to be interesting and fascinating to watch, but this came out on the 22nd, and it was put on Fox Business, or sorry, not Fox, sorry, CNN Business. And it didn't really gain a lot of traction outside of the right-wing organizations, news organizations. So again, just to be clear, it's not Smartmatic itself. However, there is an implication that the 4 executives are yet to be unnamed in the and yet to be charged, by the way. They're not even being charged in this. This is solely charging Juan Bautista. But the evidence is indicating that these executives were a part of this. They've identified, as a part of the email strings back and forth, they've identified the term salsa to reference money within these email strings. And so again, this is just kind of like the first thread on the tug, or on the carpet, that when you tug, it starts to unravel the carpet. This might be the first thread on this, and it may make it to where, we might find out a little bit more as this case goes on with regards to this. But it was because of the fact they brought it in Florida, because of the fact that the Smartmatic has offices in Florida. And so that's why it's getting charged in Florida under the grand jury. And they indicted the guy. And so we'll have to watch this. We'll have to watch and see. And by the way, in my description of my videos, I do have what is assumed to be the actual filing document. So if you want to take a look at that and read through this, if you're of any interest. I downloaded it. I haven't read all the way through it yet, but it kind of goes through a little bit about it. And so I don't want anybody to get excited off of Smartmatic. I mean, that was the intent of some of the headlines out there, was to try and make it look like Smartmatic is the one that's being indicted. It's not the case. You can't really indict a business organization, but what you can do is you can indict individuals. And they do have some individuals in here who are as yet uncharged. That could change, but as yet uncharged and as of yet unnamed about it. So there's that for you. That's, like I said, it was an article that I felt was a little obscure from most cases, or for most cases. And yes, the machines can get hacked. Of course they can. I mean, it's been proven a couple of different ways from Sunday. And in fact, the left has been on that whole thing. With the left didn't like mail-in balloting until it started benefiting them. In fact, there was a New York Times article, Dan Bongino is very fond of quoting it, where it talks about, where it talks about the mail-in balloting and how they can easily be fraudulent, or defrauded, I should say, over and over and over again. All right. So let me see. What's my next one? Oh, yes. Speaking about voter fraud. Connected together, speaking of voter fraud, we have Just the News. This Just the News article popped where apparently the FBI has decided to refuse to release documents in a probe, or as a part of a probe, into a possible nationwide voter registration fraud. Now, wait a minute. I seem to recall the left and even some on the right saying, no, there's no widespread voter fraud. Well, apparently the FBI is actually investigating it. And Just the News tried to put in a FOIA request, which, for those who don't know, FOIA stands for Freedom of Information Act. It basically allows people to query and request with some specificity about documents that are a matter of public record. Now, there are some times where the organization or the agency being served that request can actually refuse to hand them over. For an example, in the case of the FBI, they can refuse to hand them over if the FBI is doing an ongoing investigation. They can claim that that ongoing investigation takes precedence over the FOIA, and they can hold that during that investigation. Well, apparently the FBI took over a probe into the 2020 voter registration fraud that has supposedly or reportedly began in Michigan, and has denied a Freedom of Information Act request regarding the investigation, citing an exemption in the law that regarding ongoing investigations, as I just said. According to dozens of pages of police reports from the Muskegon, anyway, Muskegon, I don't know how it's pronounced, but whatever. Police department in the Michigan State Police, a firm called GBI Strategies was under scrutiny as an organization central to alleged voter registration fraud in the 2020 presidential election. Now, the matter was initially investigated by the city and state authorities, but was then taken over by the FBI. Contacts between the local law enforcement agencies and the FBI continued into 2022, but there's no evidence of what happened after that in the memos obtained by Just the News through requests made under Michigan's own Freedom of Information Act. So basically what happened is Just the News probed both under Michigan's Freedom of Information Act and the National Freedom of Information Act, and basically got some conflicting information, and outright got denied by the FBI for it because it is an ongoing investigation. So do I think that the FBI is actually going to do anything about this? Probably not. They're more than likely, as we've already seen, the FBI is corrupt. And, thank you. Muskegon is the pronunciation. But anyway, they have already, proven themselves to be questionable in their dealings with things of this nature. And so I honestly don't think it's going to go anywhere. However, as long as there are organizations such as Just the News that are out there trying to get a hold of these things, this is going to be one to watch for certain. About this. All right. Let me take a step back and tell you, hey, if you like the broadcast, if you like what I am doing, if you like the program and you like the information presented, why not do me a favor and show off your gear and your listening to the Whiskey Musings broadcast by heading over to my store, my logoed gear and motto gear store, over at store.whiskeymusings.online. That's store.whiskeymusings.online, where you can pick up some fantastic items such as hoodies, t-shirts, sweatshirts, regular sweatshirts, tank tops, glassware. There's water bottles. There's all kinds of stuff like that. You can head on over and take a look at the plethora of items that I have available, not only with my Whiskey Musings logo that you see in the beginning and the end of the broadcast, but also with my motto that says, "When I drink, I think Whiskey Musings." You can get that in certain flavors, both in black and white lettering as well, depending upon the item that it is on. And of course, there are all kinds of colors and sizes available for all of the other ones, for all of the clothing and sportswear too. I've got sports bras for the ladies. I've got active what do you call them? So, well, I call them sweatpants, but jogger pants, I think is what they called, and that kind of stuff. So go to store.whiskeymusings.online. That's store.whiskeymusings.online. Go and check that out. And if you buy something, of course, a portion of it goes to support the program. And I seriously thank you for that. And I do appreciate it. Once again, that's store.whiskeymusings.online to get great logo gear and motto gear as well. Hey, speaking of being excited and logo gear and motto gear, let's see if this works. Buddy has dancing bananas back. So apparently Buddy had some problems with Rumble, and he didn't have the dancing bananas, which apparently was one of his favorite, I don't know what they're called, the GIF emoji, GIF emoji, I don't know, whatever. Anyway, it didn't have the dancing bananas. And so, yeah, it's just fantastic. Fantastic. He's got him back. Congratulations, buddy. I know you were missing that for that. All right. Let's continue. If you ever feel like the government can ever do anything right, which, by the way, anyone in the know or anyone smart enough knows that they can't, this is not the article for you. Okay. This is not the article for you. And the reason why I say that is because this article in the Epic Times, I mean, this is just scary. Okay, if you thought the money that was going to like Ukraine was bad, or the money that Joe's been throwing at Green New Deal crap is bad, you know, I just got to tell you, this is really kind of scary. This from the Epic Times. Food stamp program loses $1 billion every month due to alleged fraud and errors, according to Senator Ernst. Yes, E-R-N-S-T, Ernst. He's put forth new legislation that would slash spending by nearly $1 billion a month by ensuring that all errors, regardless of the amount, be counted. The U.S. food stamp program has, according to Joni Ernst, sorry, I said that was a guy. That's actually a woman, I think, based on the lettering Joni, Joni. But anyway, they made the claim, Joni made the claim September 26th in a statement that announced new legislation aimed at combating the alleged billions of dollars in monthly losses from the U.S. Department of Agriculture's Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, which is called SNAP, which allows low-income families with benefit cards to buy basic food items at approved grocery stores. Known as the Snapback Inaccurate SNAP Payments Act. Now, that's a pretty cool, catchy name. I got to tell you, that's probably one of the first actual names. It sounds like it's exactly what the bill is about. But anyway, the legislation supposedly would slash spending by nearly $1 billion a month by ensuring that all errors, regardless of the amount, be counted. The proposal would also direct state governments to stop handing out benefits to people who aren't eligible, requiring states to pay back what they owe, and directs states to recollect SNAP overpayments, ensuring that each household only receives exactly what it is eligible for. Okay. Just so you know, food stamps and associated programs and everything else have all had fraud. It's been that way for a very long time. This would be, if it does exactly like it's purported to, this would be the first time, I think, in a very long time that somebody has tried to actually correct some of the problems. See, that's one of the things about government and government programs. They are literally easily defrauded. It's oftentimes hard to get anything back from it. And so I mean, I'll be honest with you. I don't hold out hope for this thing to actually being passed. And especially trying to hold states accountable for payment errors, to try and incentivize better management. Yeah, it's just not, I don't know. Anyway, so the number of Americans, according to the piece, the number of Americans enrolled in the SNAP program increased to 41.2 million from 2022. And that was up from 35.7 million in 2019. So a matter of essentially 3 years, it went from 35 to roughly 41, a little over 41 million, according to data released earlier this year by the USDA. So there's a lot of people on these stamps. And the essentially the SNAP costs rose from 60.3 billion in 2019 to a record almost 120 billion at 119.5 billion in 2022. So that's pretty much essentially a doubling without a doubling of putting people on the board. So yeah. Yeah. So that's a pretty significant increase there. In terms of the money that's coming out from that. Well, not like we ever expected that government could ever be efficient, because they can't. They just can't. And I don't even understand why anybody thinks that they can. They cannot be efficient with money because it's essentially a third-party payer system. There's no incentive to not only track the money, but there's also no incentive in order to ensure that the goods being served are worth the money being spent. They just don't care. It's not their money. So they don't give a crap. And so, yeah, it just, I mean, for anybody who thinks that the government is able to track all of our taxpayer dollars appropriately, yeah, nope. Not going to happen. All right. So I saw this pop, and for those of you who are not part of the IT world or not part of the, the radio broadcasting space or any of that, the FCC honestly has been a bit of a problem and a bane of many people's existence because of the fact that, they're a government regulation organization that is able to add things to the to laws and put regulations on companies and things like that. It's gone all the way back to, the Telecommunications Act. The FCC has been in charge, which is, the Federal Communications Commission, is a bureaucratic, unelected organization. They're appointed and they go through and do things like making sure that, they're responsible for an example, originally having, AT&T, Reagan put out the AT&T breakup and broke up Ma Bell and everything else. And so, the FCC has constantly been the bane of existence for a lot of people. Well, in the Obama era, if you recall, there was this concept called net neutrality. And the whole purpose of net neutrality was to try and make it so that there was essentially equality within the internet itself. And that's kind of a broad statement. It had to do with ideally just the cost of it initially, but then it also became things like, for an example, spaces like Rumble probably wouldn't have been able to exist under the concept of net neutrality, meaning that you can't have a left-leaning or right-leaning space on the platform on the space. Rumble being the free speech alternative essentially would fall within the net neutrality kind of thing. But things like YouTube and Google, which, by the way, under the whole net neutrality idea, those organizations were sort of exempt. The Alphabet Company and those in Facebook and some of those others, they were exempt or exempted, I should say, from the entire setup because, of course, they want those organizations to be able to do things like censor speech, for an example. Well, just here recently, according to Breitbart here, Senate Democrats are now urging the FCC to reinstate net neutrality. Now, keep in mind, you and I might think of net neutrality as, oh, yeah, it just means that you have to have, you're totally neutral, that you stay out of things. But that's not what they mean. What they are referring to as net neutrality is essentially we need to be able to regulate. We need to be able to regulate what is out there in the internet space. And so what they're attempting to do is they're trying to push more regulation on using the concept of the Federal Communications Commission and the whole idea of the Telecommunications Act in order to try and make it to where you are, number one, they're going to try and regulate things from the FCC on broadband companies rather than making it open and available for anybody to jump onto the net. And so this is kind of a dangerous, a dangerous thing because they want to reinstate, in particular, they want to reinstate Title II common carrier regulations on internet service providers. And this is what they call net neutrality. So the point being, and of course, you've got Feinstein here in the picture. You've got Senator Elizabeth Warren, Cory Booker, I am Spartacus, and a couple others like Ron Wyden out of Oregon, Amy Klobuchar out of Minnesota, and let's see, and well, why could I not forget her, Mazie Hirono out of Hawaii, who all signed on to this letter to try and push this regulation into place, which it only came in at the very end of Obama's term. It wasn't like it took off or did anything. It only lasted for about a year. And then, of course, Trump got elected and Trump took it out, got rid of it, the idea, which is actually a much better idea, to be honest with you. But anyway, so they are trying to reinstate this under Title II authority. And of course, they are advocating this. Let's see if I can find where they're talking about it. So what they are advocating for is net neutrality is a set of guidelines necessary to keep the internet open to all and free from discriminatory practices by providers. It forbids internet service providers from blocking or slowing down customers' access to site or apps, charging websites to reach users at quicker speeds, and insisting other unjust, unreasonable, and instituting other unjust, unreasonable, and discriminatory practices. Net neutrality creates an internet ecosystem that is free and open to all, and it benefits consumers, small businesses, and rural residents alike. So it's essentially trying to make broadband as a telecommunications service and make it to where the FCC can regulate it. In other words, regulate price, regulate access, so on and so forth. And while that seems great on the top end, here's the other parts that they are talking about. They have apparently heard from constituents, companies, and entrepreneurs about the need for the FCC to reassert its authority so it can prevent broadband providers from engaging in practices that harm online users, as well as potential new entrants into the broadband marketplace. So that's the key, is they're talking about preventing harm, again, we know better than you what harm is going. So here's an example. Okay. If net neutrality were to exist, organizations like True Grit Roots Network wouldn't be able to play the explicit music that we sometimes do. Now, we do it intelligently. We do it at times where it is more than likely not going to have young people be able to listen. But to be able to listen to some of that music, you can't do that on the regular radio because of the FCC and their regulations with regards to it. So things like, for an example, if they decided that seeing guns on the internet was going to be a problem, net neutrality and trying to set up the FCC to be able to limit those types of sites, you wouldn't be able to like find things on the web. Say you have all of those, gun enthusiast sites and things like that. So there's like all kinds of things that the FCC would potentially be able to do something with it. So anyway, Democrats want the rule to apply to service providers, which are not in the habit of kicking off internet users for their political viewpoints, while not recommending similar regulations on companies and platforms that are actually responsible for suppressing online discourse over the past 5 years, companies like Google, YouTube, Twitter, X, and Facebook. Progressives and Democrats lost their minds when the FCC repealed net neutrality under Trump, which, of course, they were saying that it was going to be the end of the internet and so on and so forth, which it hasn't happened. And in fact, it's actually boomed somewhat because you've had organizations such as Rumble and, TGRN and some of these other places that have been able to kick off and everything else. So this net neutrality thing, I think in its current form is really kind of a bit of a problem. And of course, whenever Democrats like something and they want to do something, you have to sit and kind of consider why. Because believe me, folks, they are not after your interests. They have no interest in your interests, to say the least. All right. And this very well could be part of what's going on here next. This next article comes from Just the News, and it has everything to do with misinfo policing. So here's the headline. With courts skeptical, which, by the way, I mean, the Supreme Court, even though they did stay the order to block the Biden administration from talking to social media companies, that doesn't mean that it's going to go Biden's way if once the case actually makes it to the Supreme Court. But apparently, with courts skeptical, Biden outsources misinfo policing to researchers in his reelection campaign. Anti-misinformation efforts show up in unexpected National Science Foundation grants. Former White House aide who cursed out big tech now leads the campaign's social media monitoring army. So essentially, obviously the whole Missouri versus Biden case is a big, big deal, and it's coming to the Supreme Court. It will eventually get there. But apparently the Biden administration is trying to find other ways to work around it, to use, again, NGOs, non-governmental organizations, in order to censor speech online. And so apparently the State Department and the National Science Foundation together awarded more than a dozen grants for misinformation-related programs with start dates this month or next, totaling about $4.4 million. The Department of Defense also awarded a no-bid $2.5 million contract last week to an artificial intelligence company that supposedly scours social media, the dark web, and audio transmissions, and whose software will be used by a DoD component that neighbors the National Security Agency. So what they're doing is they're going to be using artificial intelligence to monitor and watch streams like mine to where if I say something that they deem as misinformation, maybe I misstate something. Maybe I say something that is against the regime or whatever. This artificial intelligence will then find a way to disrupt my broadcast in order for this to work. And apparently the Biden re-election campaign is also creating an army to identify and correct purported misinformation about the president. And of course, stuff that are expected to come from rivals, including Donald Trump, and of course, people such as myself. So yeah, this is just a further. I mean, they're trying to sidestep, essentially the coming. And I'm fairly certain that the Supreme Court is probably going to, yeah, 3 Chevy. You mean you say truth? That's right. I do. Yeah. Speaking about that, I got to give you credit here. There you go. Yeah, this is another attempt by the Biden administration in order to use organizations that are outside the government in order to do what the government cannot do. And that's essentially kind of the situation. And they are just so adamant about going after misinformation, disinformation, things that they don't believe are, proper and correct or whatever. So this is just absolutely horrible. It's not surprising to me, honestly, for this entire situation, because of the fact that, Joe Biden is going to use things. He's going to find ways to get work around the Constitution because, of course, they hate the Constitution. The left hates the Constitution. They hate what it stands for, and they hate what it gives the people the power to do. Speaking of misinformation and disinformation, we actually have an individual who seems to be backing off of his initial assertions, and it might be an indication that that one of those big theories that they've put out, or one of the big things that the left has been purporting and pushing and everything else, especially the Biden administration, has been doing in order to try and change us and change what we do in this country. Check this out from the New York Post. Apparently, even Bill Gates is backtracking on the climate crisis. So the hysteria, of course, is still out there. This is from the piece. In Boston this month, I passed a church where the door bore a lurid poster reading, "Due to global climate crisis, worship in sanctuary on 9/17/23 has been canceled." So obviously, this is referring, at first the writer thought that they were referring to Hurricane Lee, which actually turned out to sea rather than making landfall, which was kind of interesting. But the thing about it is that Bill Gates is not on board anymore, it seems, with the whole climate panic. And by that, I think what they mean is that he's not out there. He does acknowledge climate change. And I think anybody who is anybody can say, yes, the climate does change. Okay. But the thing about it is that it's not a crisis. It's not something that if we do something now that we're actually going to affect anything, because the reality of it is that our effect on the planet is very little, especially if you can't get a hold of, and I've said this multiple times, you can't get a hold of countries and their processes such as China, which China is the biggest polluter in the world. India and Russia, and of course the US are up there as well. But, one country doing something and not the others is, it basically isn't going to do anything. It's not going to affect anything. And even then, a lot of climate people, climate scientists are all saying, well, we're only going to affect the earth. Even if everything was met, we'd only affect the earth by, a 0.5 degree centigrade, which really isn't that much. I mean, in the grand scheme of things, it really isn't a lot. But anyway, Bill Gates apparently was speaking at a New York Times event. Surprise, surprise. And he observed that the heavy-handed policies won't work. He said, quote, if you try to do climate brute force, you will get people who say, I like climate, but I don't want to bear the cost and reduce my standard of living. As Gates noted, many of these people are in middle-income countries like China and India that are the biggest contributors to carbon emissions today and whose emissions, unlike those of the United States, have actually been growing. He also rained on the Greens' apocalyptic parade, saying no temperate country is going to become uninhabitable. He cautioned also against untested approaches like massive tree planting. He says, quote, are we the science people or are we the idiots? Which one do we want to be? Well, Bill, I would rather be on the side of science. So anyway, Gates is essentially softening his tone on the climate crisis, kind of thing. And part of the reason for this, they go into this in the article, but part of the reason for this could be due to the fact that the truth is actually getting out there, that people are starting to realize that the climate crisis is not necessarily a climate crisis. Per se. I mean, it is occurring. Again, let's just put it out there. It is occurring. We are changing, the climate is changing, but it's not changing in the manner in which these reported models, because that's basically what they're basing all of this off of, is these models, that the models have been wrong, and they have been consistently wrong. And not only have they been consistently wrong, but they've been wrong to a large scale. And so the reality, when you look at the actual data and don't look at all of the computer modeling, but when you look at the actual data, yes, it is changing, but it's not changing to the drastic degree that these climate people like John Kerry, say that it is, or little Greta Thunberg keeps saying. It's not changing quite that fast. Now, I have another question, which with regards to the whole idea of even like listening to Bill Gates. Bill didn't finish college, and last I checked, Bill, while he's could be considered an intelligent man, was a computer programmer and a marketing genius. And yes, he did create Microsoft, but outside of that, I mean, I don't really know he doesn't really have a PhD in actually like molecular biology or climate science or any of this other stuff. So I'm kind of confused as to how we can gain weight. Not saying, and believe me, I'm not saying that just because you have a degree means that you are highly intelligent and extremely smart and should be listened to. But at the same time, though, it's just like listening to LeBron James on subjects of politics or, any other subject outside of the subject of basketball. This is not his forte. And so I'm confused as to why we give this guy so much weight. I mean, the mainstream media do, because obviously he is saying things that the mainstream media likes. But outside of that, I'm confused as to why we are listening to him, just like why we would be listening to somebody, say, the likes of Whoopi Goldberg, or why we would be listening to somebody the likes of, I don't know, Al Pacino or somebody like that. Again, I'm really confused. If I want basketball advice, will I go to would I go to LeBron James? Yes, he has made a successful career in basketball. But outside of that, I am certainly not. And he never even went to college. By the way, if I recall correctly, I don't even think he actually finished high school. He was drafted in the NBA right away. So in terms of, who to pick and who to choose to listen to on some of these subject matters as subject matter experts, I'm not all that sure that we should necessarily be putting all of our eggs in the basket of Mr. Bill Gates. So I'm a bit confused in that respect, but that seems to be the whole thing. All right. So I see I've got just a few moments left. So I think it is really quick. Just so anybody knows, this last article just kind of gives me the indication. Just so anybody knows, we have a potential shutdown happening on September 30th. Supposedly the government will run out of money. They will have spent all the money that they did in that ceiling lift, with, McCarthy back when he became speaker and all of that crap. So, potentially if the House and the Senate can't get their acts together, which right now they seem to be pretty far apart in terms of their budget negotiations and their bills, their budget spending bills, they seem to be pretty far apart. And so, there is a potential for a government shutdown on Friday. We'll see if it actually happens. But the thing about it is that there's been some polls out there to try and figure out who the American public would blame. And one survey has shown that 34% of voters would blame Republicans in Congress compared to 21% who would point fingers at congressional Democrats and 23% who said that President Biden would be at fault. Now, here's the thing. I can tell you that we have gone through several government shutdowns in the past. In fact, during the Reagan years, I think there was 4 or 5 that they went through. Just because the government shuts down does not mean that just because the government shuts down doesn't mean the world ends and that the world stops. Believe me, it doesn't. We've went through several of them. I've been through several of them. And so, yeah, this is not going to be the case. So don't fret, don't worry, don't frown, don't get too scared about this thing. It is essentially the entire thing. All right. I need to do this really quick. I got to try. Okay. So big announcement for tonight. This is it. The big announcement for tonight's, situation. It's not for me. But here we go. Get your glasses ready for doing a cheers or a congratulations or whatever. But here we go. Let me go ahead and get this all set up here for this big, huge announcement. Cannot. Here we go. Are you ready? Here we go. There we go. That's it. Outlaw Dogs, who is over on Rumble, Outlaw Dogs and her husband, Mr. Outlaw, are going to have a baby boy grandchild. So congratulations to Outlaw Dogs and hubby for having a grand boy. Grand boy. It's not mine. Not mine. No, don't get no. Don't be saying anything to me. I wish I could be announcing, by the way, with a couple of the people were like asking in the chat, you won the lottery? I wish I could be announcing that. I really wish I could be announcing that. That would be fantastic, because I guarantee you this. If I were to win the lottery, I can almost certainly guarantee you would see huge changes here on the Whiskey Musings broadcast, because I would love to be able to do this consistently 100% of my time. I might probably move to like a 3 hour a day format, 5 days a week, so on and so forth. I would love for that to occur. All right. That is my final Whiskey Musings thought of the evening. Congratulations, Outlaw Dogs. That would be fantastic. That is fantastic for you. Congratulations, Outlaw Dogs. I appreciate the fact that you let me kick that out for that. All right. So, I'm not a liberal, so it ain't happening. Well, that would explain the problem. Yeah, that would explain the problem. Okay. So, and I guess it is Outlaw Dogs' first grandbaby. So congratulations. All right. So that is my final Whiskey Musings thought of the evening. Do me a favor. If you like the broadcast, if you like the information that I present to you, head on over to Rumble for sure. Head on over to Rumble, sign up for an account. It's free. Find the Whiskey Musings broadcast channel, and of course, hit the follow button. Because of the fact that I don't ever know how long I'm going to be broadcasting on some of the other channels. So yeah, definitely follow me on Facebook, follow me on YouTube, all of those, but just keep in mind that those, channels could kick me off at any time. So obviously I can be found on Rumble all the time. Otherwise, we will see you Saturday night right here on the Whiskey Musings broadcast, 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern, and have a great rest of your week. We'll see you guys all on Saturday. Good night, everybody.
The Whiskey Musings broadcast is produced by Active Eye Media, LLC. All rights reserved.